10.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate. So
is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're fourth in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Headliners is coming right up, but first our top stories tonight. The first migrant has reportedly been sent to Rwanda, according to The Sun newspaper. They're claiming that the unnamed man was flown out of the UK yesterday evening and is now in Kigali. It's after his asylum bid was rejected last year and he voluntarily agreed to move to the Central African nation, receiving £3,000. This scheme is said to be separate to a forced deportation programme due to start in July. If correct, it would be the first time that the government has ever relocated a failed asylum seeker to a third country. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has slammed the news as an extortionate pre-election gimmick. GB News contacted the Home Office for confirmation. Now, without confirming the story, they issued this statement. We are now able to send asylum seekers to Rwanda under our Migration and Economic Development Partnership. This deal allows people with no immigration status in the UK to be relocated to a safe third country where they will be supported to rebuild their lives. Video has emerged showing the moment that police arrested a man wielding a sword in north-east London. Officers cornered him at a property, bringing the suspect to the ground with 3 separate taser discharges. He's been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy. The 36-year-old suspect is now in hospital. Police are saying that they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. 4 other people were injured, including 2 police officers. A jealous ex-partner who killed a mother in front of her 2 children has been handed a life sentence. 46-year-old Obert Moyo attacked 35-year-old Perseverance Nkub in her bedroom before chasing her into the street. Once there, he stabbed her through the heart with a meat skewer. He's been told he must serve a minimum of 27 years. And Donald Trump has been threatened with jail in the United States for violating a gag order in his hush money trial. Judge Juan Merchan fined the former president $9,000 and warned him any further infractions would lead to incarceration. Merchan had imposed the gag order to prevent Mr. Trump from criticising witnesses. He was fined $1,000 for each of 9 online statements. Trump is arguing that the gag order violates his right to freedom of speech. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Time now for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, two comedians with no beginnings to their talent. It's Leo Kearse and Steve N. Allen.
That's very dead.
It's not very nice, Simon.
I know. They always team me up with this disobliging comment.
Don't start blaming some invisible people.
In fact, I suspect you probably collaborate with them to put me on the back foot, don't you?
No.
You say get him to say that about us, and then he'll be apologetic and diminutive in the next...
It's not even true. I can knit. So there are beginnings to my talent.
What are your modern accomplishments? I was trying to go through a list the other day. You know, in the old days, that man used to have to con a ship and be able to butcher a hog and light a fire in the wild. What would you say they are nowadays?
I can't correctly butcher a hog.
You can make a mess of one.
Exactly. That's also one of the meanings of butcher, isn't it?
Yeah.
What have you got, Leo? Got anything?
I genuinely can prepare animals that are dead.
Can you?
Yeah.
What do they call it? That's the dress and like a crab, isn't it?
That's fancy English terms. I just rip the guts out and stick it on a plate. That's all I do.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to the second half. In the meantime, let's have a look at the front pages. We have the Daily Mail. Prostate scans that could cut deaths by 40%. We have the Guardian. 22 minutes of horror. Boy killed in sword rampage. The Telegraph with that story too. Schoolboy killed in daylight sword rampage. The Times. Immigration levels fall amid visas crackdown. The iNews. Boy 14 killed on his way to school in horror sword attack. And finally, the Daily Star. Make Britain great again with Bin Man. So those were your front pages. I think it's Count Bin Face, isn't it? But I don't want to have to read all the other candidates, so steer away from that. Kicking off the in-depth look into Wednesday's front pages with the Telegraph, Leo.
So the Telegraph leads with the big story today, obviously, is the schoolboy killed in a daylight sword rampage, and they've caught the man. He had a samurai sword, so I mean, obviously there's a lot of knife crime in London, but the knives are getting bigger, it appears. And, absolutely horrific. There are also two first responders, two police injured. They tasered them. There's some pretty, gripping and gruesome video.
So they've got him. There's no ambiguity about this. He's been
nabbed. He's alive. He's in hospital right now. They don't know a motive. They don't know if he's not known to the police, which you think somebody who had serious psychological issues would probably be known to the police. But they're saying it's not terror related at the moment.
Not terror related or gang related, just psycho. Is that the implication?
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, he looks kind of too old to be in a gang. But I mean, this is all speculation. I think it's important. After spending a few minutes on Twitter, I think it's important to avoid speculation.
Absolutely. I mean, the temptation with a samurai sword, Steve, as well, is to assume that there's a bit of a kind of mental abdication there as well. You know what I mean? That's the kind of like LARPing end of the spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, we don't know the details. Even the police say that we deserve the details of this kind of crime, that we need to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what? We sit on this desk so often and say bad things about the police. I think it is worth saying they did this job all right. I mean, one of the headlines talks about 22 minutes of horror, but 22 minutes from finding out that this is happening to getting it stopped. And, two of them injured, and it shows there's bravery there. They're stepping in.
Is there any implication that he would have been, like, up and down the street waving the sword?
Well, he was running down gardens, like jumping fences, but that was probably to try and avoid the capture. Then got caught in a front garden. Being tasered 3 times as well. I mean, it's not the story to be glib about, but... Well, I didn't think it took that many times being tasered. They dropped the voltage or something.
Well, with the taser, I mean, there's plenty of clips I have seen on American TV more often where they use the taser and people keep coming. And I think it can be, people used to say about angel dust, it was known as, wasn't it? PCP, that can allow you to, there's a clip on there, which can allow you to overcome otherwise the sort of muscle contractions is how a taser works, isn't it? I think it's not just pain, but it's supposed to sort of cramp you. But Well, I mean, that would certainly...
And also it's got to get, the two prongs have got to get a good connection.
Right.
It depends where the connection is as well on your body.
Baggy hoodie could actually be quite good armour in a way. Let's move on to slightly better news in the Daily Mail, the prostate news.
Yeah, good news. Prostate scans that could, and that is doing a lot of heavy lifting in the headline, cut death by 40%. What it basically is they're going to get a massive dump of data and analyse it.
Right.
This is the way of...
Is it a literal dump?
I mean, it depends if you do the test badly. I don't know. I mean, this is... I don't know what kind of scans they're talking about, but it might see the end of the old-fashioned prostate test, which is going to be me not going to the doctors anymore.
Yeah.
But no, this is good news. It's so speculative, but we're going to be... The UK is leading this research. It will be the biggest data set of ever, and hopefully it then means that smaller indicators will be picked up. You catch it earlier, you save lives.
I have a slightly renegade view about prostate, because an awful lot of older men die with prostate cancer rather than of it. We know that it's a condition that gets you sooner or later if you live long enough. But the other thing about the prostate is it just becomes a massive inconvenience and discomfort, doesn't it? It's the enlarged prostate that means you're getting up 3 or 4 times in the night. You know, it's the enlarged prostate that means you can never really have a satisfying evacuation. What we ultimately need is to be able to remove the prostate safely and efficiently at a certain point when it's no longer required.
Can't we shrink it using some sort of medicine?
Yeah, that sort of thing, something like that, down to the size of a walnut. I mean, it's perfectly possible to shrink your liver, isn't it, using alcohol? Yeah. So you would think there'd be something...
what cocktail works for prostate?
It's right next to that good nerve, isn't it? That's why the operation is so feared. I can't remember the name of the nerve, but the one nerve that still means you do some sexy stuff.
Yes, yes.
That's often
well,
done.
That is to tiptoe around this a little bit, but you can have your prostate removed and continue to have erections, have a satisfying sex life, although, you know, there are probably lots of other things that might mitigate that anyway to a certain extent.
No offence, Simon, but I'd still rather go to a hospital.
Yeah, no. I've just got the old corkscrew on the Swiss Army knife. That's all you need, mate. Anyway, let's have a look at the Times, Leo. What have they got?
So more good news. So immigration levels fall amid visas crackdown. So a crackdown on foreign students' visas has slashed the number of dependents they're bringing into the UK by 80%. So previously, students could bring dependents, family with them, and so the student visa was like a Trojan horse to bring students who could change their visa or work on the side, and also bring their family who could then work, claim benefits, use services or whatever. But the data reveals that the number of dependents granted visas to join their student spouse has fallen from nearly 33,000 in the first quarter of last year to 6,700 in the same period this year. And the number of overseas students applying for visas also fell by 15%. So, I mean, it's really sort of vindicating Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly's approach to this, because we've known for a while now a lot of colleges in the UK aren't really about education. They're about, they're almost like a sort of visa. You can buy a visa to come to the UK, and the education is just a sort of silence.
It's like exit through the gift shop, isn't it? You get
so
the way in.
I don't know why we don't just have visa auctions. We could raise a huge amount of money for the national purse and just auction visas to people who want to come here instead of giving the money to rubbish universities.
UK-approved people smugglers, traffickers. You know, we could set up an office in Libya.
We already do. They're called the RNLI.
Yes, that's true. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a whiff of context would be the reason this was brought in to try and get a good headline out of it. They've got a good headline. This is reduced. So the big problem was legal migration was 700,000, around 700,000. It was 30-ish thousand, dropped down to 80% less than that. That means still it would be approximately 700,000. These numbers are so small in comparison to the problem they're trying to solve.
Yes.
And they've managed to get a good headline out of it without really doing a big bit of solving the big problem.
But this is just one section of the problem. So, I mean, they've got to sort of do this, replicate this across, all sections.
Well, as you were saying earlier, the first Rwanda shipment is underway, and so obviously that's going to put a paid to the small boats. Little by little, niche by niche. We'll tighten this
One
up.
guy got sent back. We'll take that one off that 700,000 figure.
It's a huge deterrent, Steve. That's the issue. Ending this section with The Guardian. Sad to see that we're not covering the Star, but let's have a look at The Guardian.
Well, they've got Minister lifts cap on faith school selection. And there's a rule, if you are oversubscribed as a faith school, there's a rule about having 50%. You could have 50% just the faith you're after, and then you had to open it to people in the catchment area.
Oh, right.
That's going to be dropped. Even some of the people against this as an idea include former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, is against the idea of it. And
so this is to allow faith schools to be more determined by the faith?
Yes, exclusive. Yeah, get rid of that 50% cap.
That seems to me reasonable to me.
Who looks at the UK in 2024 and says, you know what this country needs? More segregation based on race and religion.
Yeah, but we know that's not what it is, really.
But it will end up being that.
Yeah, but a lot of faith schools, it's because they have good results and they have good discipline and because parents like to know what kind of children their children are going with. It's not really so much about the faith and the indoctrination.
Are you just thinking about the Catholic schools there?
Well, there were Christian churches, schools in London before we moved out that had a very good reputation, and it wasn't because we weren't religious, but we were, like a lot of parents considered faking it because it was basically you get a private school quality education. Now, whatever that might be down to, I don't know, but obviously it's largely down to eliminating, a certain kind of people that the state school can't have no ability to weed out. And that is what it really is. It's not, I don't think, because you want your children to grow up with a strong faith. It's because you want them to grow up without interruptions.
But maybe that's like one type of faith school. There are other kinds that are funded by Saudi Arabia and actually push quite sort of abhorrent views that even Guardian readers who love faith schools, a certain type of faith school, wouldn't like. I mean, things like how to stone a woman to death or why homosexuality is a sin.
Given Rowan Williams has come out against them, it's probably. I mean, he likes those kind, right? He's pro-Sharia law, isn't he? But it's the Christian ones he won't like.
I feel for legal reasons the host should push back on that point.
I like the way Philip Pullman is mentioned, though. He, of course, wrote that sort of anti-Catholic trilogy, didn't he? The what was it called? The Northern Lights and the Secret
Harry
Telescope
Potter
or something. Not the Secret Telescope. That's a different story altogether. Anyway, those were your front pages. In part 2, we eviscerate the innards. We have the latest on dodgy visas, Monty Panesar's flying circus, and what do the Chinese want with all that gold? We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this was a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Leo Kirsten, Steve N. Allen. The Philip Pullman trilogy was called His Dark Materials. Thank you for all your tweets. Steve, Times Now, a surprising new ally for Gorgeous George. It's Marvellous Monty throwing his turban into the ring.
Yeah, Monty Panesar to stand as MP for Workers' Party in general election. This is in Ealing, Southall. George Galloway's party, the man who is very famous at the moment for saying that Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are two cheeks of the same backside.
I despise Rishi Sunak.
But he's two cheeks of the same backside, and George is very much putting himself in the middle. So they've announced 200 candidates to stand in different areas. Monty has said he would like to become Prime Minister, which shows to really understand politics then, because that's not going to happen, is it? I mean,
his initials, no, the wrong way around. He's MP, isn't he? MP.
Yeah.
MP for PM.
But so George Galloway obviously recently won the by-election, made it all about the situation in Gaza.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Monty has said he will leave foreign policy to Galloway as he's no expert in such matters. He's standing on a platform of fan ownership for football clubs.
Wow.
So, interesting take on it. He has also said he wants to get rid of London's ULEZ, which will be a vote winner.
Yeah.
The member for Ealing will not go to
Sorry?
Ealing.
Ealing, yeah. So that is in the territory, yeah.
But still won't have the powers to do it. But it'll be a vote winner. Just saying that you want it will do it.
I like the way he says, so he's saying, I don't know much about foreign policy. Are there any other topics he does know anything about, conceivably?
No, mainly football ownership of, shared ownership of football clubs.
And spin bowling, right?
I imagine it's quite hot on that. I don't know if that's a policy in the manifesto. You can buy the manifesto for about £4. It's available for you to go through. Galloway's going to stand Workers' Party candidates in loads of seats, but not against Jeremy Corbyn. So, being a Putin lover pays off.
Yeah.
And it also says in the article that Chris Williamson, who's a deputy, works on Iranian state TV. This is Press TV, a TV channel that Ofcom hates more than this one.
Yeah.
So that puts it in context.
No, I remember it often gets brought up in conversations of that kind, doesn't it? I don't know. Monty Panesar is a very popular bloke, and he's a Sikh, right? Which is often mistaken by the less sort of detail-orientated for Muslims, but it's quite a different thing entirely, really.
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting that, considering George Galloway has historically got so much of his support from... He stood as the sort of Muslim candidate in places. I mean, recently that's exactly what he did, making Gaza his main thing. Monty Panesar being Sikh, it's interesting that
he's broadening it out a little bit. Well, he's a very likeable chap, always appears to. I'm not that bothered about cricket, but people seem to like him.
He's no Joey Barton.
Over to Dublin's fair city now, Leo, where the girls are so pretty, but the tent city less so.
Yeah, so how anti-immigration protests have grown in Ireland with riots in Dublin, arson attacks on proposed asylum centres and tractor blockades as the capital's Skid Row tent city, where they house a lot of asylum seekers, continues to grow. So this is coming as a political storm brews between the UK and Irish governments because they're grappling with rising immigration. That's grown even more, even higher recently because people have been leaving Britain because they think there's a risk of being deported to Rwanda. So they've been going to Ireland, which is seen as a sort of safer place. And because Ireland designated the UK an unsafe destination, so said they wouldn't deport anyone back to the UK. Now they're frantically trying to redo that legislation to make the UK a safe place. And I think they have designated it safe again, so they can try sending people back. But then the UK is saying, well, no, we can't send people back to France. If we can't send people back to Europe, why should Europe be able to send people to us? So people are going to be going backwards and forwards.
Refugees ratchet, that's the rule.
Yeah.
One way only.
Yeah, basically. And some people are saying that Ireland should take these people in because, you know, historically Ireland's got sent a lot of people out, especially to America, and to the UK. But I mean, I think that was to culturally similar communities. We've seen a lot of sort of social tension in Ireland because of the amount of people that have come from quite culturally distant places.
It's interesting that, isn't it? In America, that conversation gets quite heated about how Irish were bracketed in the early 20th century. They weren't considered white, apparently. They were considered to be a sort of subspecies of, you know, in these days when there was quite a lot of really quite now unpalatable racial designations and so on. And so perhaps they should be more tolerant. I don't know. I don't think that should be visited upon them, do you?
Well, I'm not entirely convinced that I think we're falling for a bit of a narrative here. I think Ireland certainly had a problem with immigration numbers, and they've got a stat that 80% are coming through the border. But that's always been the case anyway. It's just easier to travel across land, isn't it? And so now I think what happened was the Rwanda bill got passed and they thought, hang on, here's a really good time to say this is why we should be handing them back to the UK.
Right.
They've just been making the journey through the UK anyway. It feels like it's opportunistic. But also, there is a rule within the EU that you can send migrants back to a safe country that they have travelled through. Well, if they've come through the UK, they've come through France. I think you don't have the problem about the UK not being in the EU. So have a chat with France.
So France could go through that way. But there is definitely anger on the streets of Dublin. There is, and they are organising, and they seem a lot less inhibited.
Well, this is the thing. Irish people haven't been broken yet. You know, British people have been absolutely broken. We're full of this guilt, and we've had it hammered into us. And the sort of the woke panjandrums who dictate our culture have told us that if you oppose or question mass immigration in any way, then you're a despicable racist and should never work again.
Absolutely. Steve, The Guardian now, they say a jump in homelessness has laid bare the scale of the housing crisis and vice versa, presumably.
Homelessness jumps by 16% in England, laying bare scale is how I thought it was, but it's not what it says. So let's define our terms so we don't row about it this way later. They're talking about no fixed abode homelessness rather than street homelessness because these are families with children, so they end up in temporary accommodation. If you want to do proper homelessness, be a single bloke. Because there is something motivating about, and in the back of your mind, knowing if you mess up, you're growing a big beard and drinking special brew. I think it keeps us all that little bit level of focused. But nearly 45,000 households now have nowhere to live. It's gone up 16%. It's a mixture of rental sector, cost of living, all the things. And all of them, in a little tree diagram, go back to not enough houses. It's the same problem that causes all the problems.
Did they go back to not enough houses, or did they go back to too many people? I mean, if you let 1.2 million people into a country in a year, and that's just in 1 year, never mind all the years before that also had hundreds of thousands of people coming in. Where are those people going to...
To that point, though, these 45,000 households would have been in a house already, so other people coming in wouldn't have usurped them.
Well, then how did they get usurped?
Because they couldn't afford rent, because the rent then becomes too expensive.
The rent becomes too expensive because there's too much demand and not enough supply.
Because you didn't build enough houses.
Or because you let in a million extra people. There's never been a year in which you've built a new million houses in the UK. There's never, ever been that year.
And I think that agrees with the point that the problem slowly gets baked in. There's not enough, even if we have had zero on migration, there's not enough
are also, like, more people living as single occupancy households and that sort of thing. Things
but
like
I think it's the other way around. I think people are sharing. I mean, I shared flats right up until my 40s, which I don't think somebody from a previous generation would have done.
Well, I did, but I recognised that was my own fault. Daily Mail now, Leo, and they've noticed that China has been amassing huge gold reserves for the past 18 months, and they wonder if it's up to something.
Yeah, this is quite worrying news. So China has bought a huge £135 billion stockpile of gold, raising fears it's preparing to safeguard its economy against Western sanctions ahead of a possible invasion of Taiwan. And they've also been offloading more than $400 billion worth of US Treasury bonds. So they're trying to detach their economy from the dollar. And gold is the perfect sort of fungible or is it fungible or non-fungible? I can't remember. Anyway,
I think
you can
that's
spend it
fungible,
anywhere.
yeah.
You can sort of spend it anywhere. It's not, you know, you
Certainly
won't be
malleable.
Yeah, you won't be.
It's ductile. It's incredibly malleable and ductile. It must be fungible.
Yeah, you won't be sort of, subject to sanctions or anything.
No,
you can't sanction
You can't
gold.
tell where it comes from.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Ukraine. This comes as Ukraine has shown that the West, you know, will make a big show of support for a country that gets invaded by a dictator like Xi Jinping or Putin, but then we'll get bored and stop supporting them. And also, Xi Jinping is 70. The demographics in China are looking pretty grim for China. So it's not actually going to overtake America. This is probably the closest it's ever going to get to comparative power with America. So this is his only chance to sort of take Taiwan back while he still can.
Yes, not that it will cure any of his demographic problems, but it will. It's an absolutely fundamental clause in their whole sort of their contract, their mission statement, isn't it? It is quite interesting that I have a couple of friends who invest in that kind of market, and they've been observing this for a number of years, that China's, I think it's been stockpiling gold even more than 18 months, which is what the Mail said. And there was concern at one point that they were going to try and launch a new default currency, have a gold-backed currency, which would be the first one for a very long time, you know, and like challenge dollar hegemony on that front. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I have no idea about whether they'd be able to launch this separate...
It's probably not realistic in terms of the amount of gold you'd need to do that. The other available option is Bitcoin, of course. I don't know whether the Chinese have considered paddling into that.
I think the idea of stockpiling gold, I mean, it is worrying, and I think Nigel Farage was the face of adverts about buying gold, so we need to look in to see who he's going to invade next. But this, you're right, it's the perfect time. This is really the time to be worried, because also there's the cover, the distraction of Russia, the distraction of the proxies of Iran. So this is China, Russia, Iran, get North Korea in there. It's the Creek nations, ladies and gentlemen.
And is it also timed for the election in November? Do you think they'll do it under cover of that? I mean, I suppose that would be quite problematic as well.
Well, I guess if Trump gets in and he's more isolationist, although Republicans tend to be isolationist when they're in opposition, and then when they get in, they're actually a lot more, we're going to beat you up.
The funny thing about Trump was the very first thing he did when he was president, the first kind of spanner he threw in the works, was to phone Taiwan, wasn't it? Direct. Do you remember that? And had addressed them as such.
And he provided enormous military support to Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. Well, interesting times lie ahead. The Welsh, meanwhile, we're going to do that in the next part. I do apologise, we are halfway through, but we do have the Welsh attack on lying MPs coming up. We also have students finding out in Colombia and judging people by the quality of their rhymes, all to come in the third quarter. See you then.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. A different day tomorrow. In the east, we'll have much more cloud compared to today, whereas in the west, it should be a little brighter. Still some wet weather around, though, across parts of Wales and southwest England this evening, affecting the West Midlands too. That showery rain working into southwest Scotland. At the same time, a few showers coming into eastern England, particularly Norfolk, Suffolk and up towards Lincolnshire. Many other areas, though, will be dry. Quite a mild night. Temperatures in some towns and cities staying in double digits. On to Wednesday, and a very different day across the northeast of England and eastern Scotland. Much more cloud around. There will be some rain at times here as well, particularly across the far northeast through the late morning into the early afternoon. A much brighter day there for Wales and southwest England. We'll see some sunny spells for Northern Ireland and particularly western Scotland. 18 degrees likely here, and further south with a bit of brightness we might get close to 20 Celsius. But in the south late on, look at this, some heavy rain working up from France, and we could well see some big downpours and some thunderstorms, particularly through the early hours of Thursday morning across southern England, maybe the Midlands and parts of South Wales. So some rumbles of thunder, some flashes of lightning. They'll be clearing away during Thursday morning, but still staying cloudy with some showers in the south on Thursday. Many places elsewhere seeing some good spells of sunshine, but cool and cloudy on some of these North Sea coasts. But in the sunshine, 20 degrees possible in western Scotland.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. Steve, we have The Guardian now. Welshmen say politicians speak with forked tongue.
Yep, Welsh Senate members consider criminalising lying politicians. Right, so the ex-Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price, leading proponent, says there's a credibility gap in politics. It's become a gaping chasm. Yeah. But you can't make it illegal. It's not going to work. Has he not seen the world we live in right now, where there's no issue of truth? Whichever side you think you belong to, you will stomach any old Thames water floating turd to believe your guy, your side is right. So all this will do is move that argument from social media into some courts.
It has also, I mean, it might be, possible to say I was in Birmingham on Thursday and you weren't, you were in Liverpool. And I suppose if you get caught on that level, there are processes. But just say, for instance, this government is fascist, or this government is communist, or this government is anti-Semitic, or this government appeases terrorists.
Or this is a woman.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, some people would say, oh, my God, this definitely isn't a woman. And other people would say, yes, this is the best kind of woman.
This is the woman, and technically and legally, of course, due to some really quite extraordinary legislation, they might have the law on their side.
Yeah.
I mean, there are caveats in the proposed bill that opinion would be not included, that if you're speaking of a future intention, it's not included, all of these things, which actually basically means there'd be very few...
Oh, he's actually drawn up a bill, has he?
There's some suggestions, suggested bill. However...
Because if you mislead the House, that's an actionable, that's a prosecutable offence, isn't it, to mislead the House, and you can be... I mean, that's what Boris Johnson was accused of.
Because he didn't correct the record at first... opportunity. So I think the system we've got actually kind of works with.
Yes, it's not like you can just get away with it scot-free. There are those other things that you have privilege in Parliament to be able to libel and slander people, right? Which is kind of lying in itself, because if it's true, then it's not libel, I think, anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I mean, we know that this is only ever going to be used to persecute political dissidents.
Yes,
like, we've seen stuff like, I mean, in America, they'd love this. They just, they bang Trump up for this instead of having to, like, tease various other things into federal charges.
But this chap has a particular issue with Tony Blair. Would it be one of was it the war criminal thing?
Yeah, back in the 2000s, mid-2000s.
Actually, this is a great idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But then he says, back then it was almost laughed out of court with comments such as, the prisons aren't big enough. And he says, I think now it's coming from the margins to be seen as a serious proposition. No, the prisons are fuller.
Yeah,
this is a stupider idea.
Staying with The Guardian now, and the old me sowing, me reaping meme has come to Columbia.
Yeah, so Columbia University students, this is a university in America, not in Columbia, but it's one of the fancy Ivy League ones. The students took over an academic building early on Tuesday, and they now face expulsion. A spokesperson for the university has said as tensions surrounding the students' pro-Palestinian and quite anti-Israel demonstration have escalated. So a Columbia spokesman said, we made it very clear that the work of the university cannot be endlessly interrupted by protesters who violate the rules. Because apparently medical students have been unable to, do their tasks and their practicing and stuff because there's people blowing horns and playing, bongos and stuff.
Yeah.
So they've been sending the police in. They've actually been dealing, they've been quite heavy-handed with these protests. Not that I'm saying that's a bad thing. I love seeing cops beating up students.
And a couple of professors as well.
And professors. There's an amazing clip of a professor being carted off by the cops.
Help, I'm a professor.
I'm a professor. And then somebody commented underneath saying, like, I'm a professor as the white person's I can't breathe.
Yes.
So... But, I mean, this is... I don't know. I think there've been calls for free speech on campus, but this sort of goes beyond free speech, and this is recognised as doing that because they're only doing this when it's Israel is involved. They weren't doing it when Syria was doing it, or Afghanistan, or any other country. And they've also had chants of things like "kill the Jews," which is unarguably, evil and discriminatory. But the reason this came about is because critical race theory was allowed to flourish on campus, which is explicitly anti-white. So these students have lived in an atmosphere where it's perfectly fine to demonise an entire race.
Anti-white and also anti-power. They see everything through the power matrix, so who's powerful is definitely wrong and who's weak and vulnerable is definitely in the right. All kinds of things were built up almost with this in mind. It's extraordinary.
This is why I thought you'd be in favour of the protest stopping people getting into university to slow down the learning of the things you hate. More of this, yeah? But I think every single time we talk about one of these, it's simple. Right to protest, so protest. Not right to break the law. You break the law, you get carted off by the police. It seems really simple.
Absolutely, and not disrupt other people who are trying to learn as well.
But I know everyone will go like, but my cause is so important, I have to break the law. Everyone thinks that.
And also, I mean, university college in America is so expensive. Yeah. The fees that they are going to have paid and not get back, presumably, if they get turfed out, it's going to be...
But then the universities are going to lose that money as well from kicking people out. It's not like they're going to pay for their third and fourth year.
Yeah, that's true. Well, might be some interesting opportunities to take up second-year history. Steve, we have The Guardian again, and it seems a fondness for rap and drill music is being used as evidence of criminal character in a way that Sondheim and Sibelius just aren't.
Rap music used as evidence in scores of trials in England and Wales. Study finds. Sadly, they don't mean witnesses are using the medium to give evidence and testimony. I think, that's the man, he's in the court dock. Locking him up would be a short shock. That's the guy, did I stammer? Put him right in the slammer. Word.
Very good.
But what they mean is they've been looking at the use of someone doing a drill music video being used in evidence against them. And I suppose there's an argument. It's not as though anyone tried to arrest Johnny Cash for that shooting in Reno. We just presumed he'd made it up. So just putting something in a song doesn't mean you did it. But this is actually used more about speaking to the character of the person. If you're the kind of person whose hobby is making videos about all the crimes you've done, does a jury of your peers think you're more likely to have done some crime?
This is it. The way the story is presented, and most of the voices at The Guardian have foregrounded, suggests that it's simply the genre, like the kind of the beats and the fact that it's not sung in a haltering falsetto, rather than the subject matter of the lyrics, which does in drill tends to be about quite specific revenge killings and so on, isn't it? It's not even a general kind of gangster, I like my guns.
The police aren't making this stuff up. I mean, I worked as a criminal intelligence analyst, and the police painstakingly mapped out the criminal gangs, and the annoying thing about this is The Guardian's coming in saying, this is just racist and all the rest of it. Number one, white people get wrapped up in this as well. No pun intended. And number two, The Guardian, they're all like these effete liberal milquetoast living in posh places. They're not going to be affected by these gangs. I mean, what we saw in El Salvador is in fact, this thing that have the joint enterprise cases where they basically prosecute people for being linked, for being in a gang with other people who've committed a crime. It's incredibly effective in stopping gang crime.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some great quotes in here. The targeted reforms to end the wide-ranging criminalisation of black expressive culture.
Yeah.
That is basically, I don't know, what is you call that, the racism of low expectations? The idea that singing almost exclusively about brutal killings is black expressive culture.
Yeah. But I think my favourite bit is where they said they're against using police officers as rap experts. I don't think that's what they're doing. I don't think they're critiquing the rap and locking them up for that.
Oh, dear. Leo, I expect Steve will be along shortly with his correlation does not equal causation nonsense. But before that, smartphones are rotting young people's brains.
Well, schools that ban mobile phones completely are more than twice as likely to be rated outstanding, a study has found. Or, as Steve might point out, schools that are twice as likely to be rated outstanding are more likely to ban mobile phones. But so this report by the Policy Exchange think tank found that children at secondary schools with a ban in place achieved GCSE results that are 1 or 2 grades higher.
And can I just, sorry to interrupt, that is the very best that you would hope from sending your kids to private school, incidentally. 1 or 2 2 grades is literally the best thing you'll get for paying 20 grand a year.
Yeah, so you could just take their phones off them and achieve the same thing. And this is despite the fact, and this goes against the sort of correlation argument that Steve hasn't actually made yet.
Prove wrong with that, even
Turf him out. Tired of him.
The schools with complete bans had a higher proportion of pupils eligible for free school meals than schools with less restrictive policies. So they're more sort of...
it's the Michaela thing, basically, isn't it? They're falling in the Michaela line. Steve, go on. What
there are 2 things. There's correlation in this causation. No, actually, this looks like good research. It also looks like, if you look at this as cost-benefit analysis, the benefit, whether it is there through some non-disclosed linkage, is worth it. The cost is not being on your phone.
No, exactly,
I mean, Putin can have GPS jammers that stops planes. Surely the physics department can just stop phones, and it's not about whether phones are bad. There's not a lot of research that actually proves phones are bad. It's spoken about loads.
But they do distract. They definitely do distract.
That's the thing. This is about how difficult is it to learn stuff. It's actually quite difficult at school. So focus, have fewer distractions, get rid of your phones.
It's interesting. Jonathan Haidt, who we may have mentioned on here before, has written a book recently called The Age of Anxiety, I think, in which he really feels that smartphones have done a lot of damage to kids' mental health. But this isn't mental health so much. This is... but he is...
in Norway, they banned mobile phones and in 3 years, mental health interventions for girls dropped by 60% and bullying halved across girls and boys.
Wow, that's amazing. That really is...
When you've actually got to bully in person, it takes effort.
Yeah.
And so you don't do it as much.
I was always sceptical because my daughter had a mobile phone and I was anxious about it. But actually, when I saw all her messages were so unbelievably sort of supportive and reassuring, all her friends would send each other little, you look so cute.
That's even worse.
I was thinking, exactly, she's going to encounter the real world at some point. But everyone said I look gorgeous. Steve, times now, and as someone once said, the more I hear about these Nazi chaps, the less I like the sound of them.
That's my first joke done. There it is. Human remains found in Hermann Goering's Wolf's Lair home. I mean, if your home's called the Wolf's Lair, I think you're already on the baddie side. We've got.
I think it was Adolf's home, wasn't it? And Herman had a sort of granny flat, I think.
Yeah, it was in the annex, which is I think they probably enjoyed. 5 skeletons, including that of a baby, alongside occult symbols, have been discovered by hobby archaeologists in Adolf Hitler's Eastern Centre of Command. One of them was a baby. They think it might be a family. I mean, this is so gross. Is this another news story put in there by Joe Lycett? It feels like this has to be made up. Hobby archaeologists as well. Another reason not to be a hobby archaeologist is that you might find this death occult thing. This is why I don't go doing my 5K running in the woods, because they're always the ones who find the body.
Yeah,
I'm not into this at all. Octavian Bartoszewski, something like that, was a member of the archaeology team. He said, it's not nice.
Yeah.
No kidding.
It is. I mean, I don't know, obviously time passes, but I think most of the Nazi preoccupations are still fairly fresh in people's minds, aren't they? We know that they were into the occult. I think Goering was particularly, in fact.
But we don't know if they were killed by, German forces or if they're killed by Soviets or Poles after they took over the area.
The suggestion being that they were part of some ritual killing. Is that the sort of...
Or just a family being killed, because Bartoszewski says, but why kill an entire family? I mean, is he aware of the history of Germany when they lost the war? I mean, the Soviets enacted brutal revenge.
Yes, absolutely,
There were also found with these things I'd never heard of before, belemnoids, spherical or bullet-shaped fossils that were often placed alongside bodies to bring them luck in the afterlife. So, they weren't all bad.
Well, that's 3 down, 1 to go. Last section has right-wing faces, if you haven't had enough of those. Fritzl on the move and a wall full of bees. Stick around, see you shortly.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Now, American actress Melissa McCarthy has spoken out in defence of her
best friend, Meghan Markle, calling her an inspiring woman suffering hate for getting on with her life. And the Duchess of Sussex has faced widespread criticism after she sent 50 friends and influencers gift-wrapped jam jars to celebrate the launch of the first product of a new brand, American Riviera Orchard. Well, let's speak now to a great friend of the show, the former BBC Royal correspondent and a man who likes his jam, Michael Cole. Michael, the absurdity continues. What's the latest?
Good afternoon, Martin. The plot thickens even as the jam sets. This has become a major story. Even the great Financial Times took an interest at the weekend, helpfully pointing out that you can get a jar of Dutchy organic strawberry jam for £2.80 at a well-known supermarket. Now, Dutchy Organic, the proprietor of that, of course, is His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, the older brother of Prince Harry. And here we see it, American Riviera Orchard Montecito jam. We're getting here, this is getting very serious. And of course, her mates, she's got some interesting friends. Melissa McCarthy, who is an actress in something I've never heard of. But anyway, she says sticking up for good old Meghan, and Meghan's a woman of her own. And she, there we are, seeing Miss McCarthy. But other friends of the great Meghan have taken a contrary view and think that going down this route of selling jam is not going to get her anywhere in life.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for the final section. Leo, scientific backing for the observable reality that the GB News offices are like a casting call for Desperate Dan movies.
So what your face says about how you'll vote in the election, square-jawed people are more likely to have right-wing views, researchers suggest. This is Stanford University, so students there have taken a break from sitting with keffies on, and they've found that political beliefs can be determined based on inherent facial characteristics, and artificial intelligence can pick up on them. So left-wingers tend to have smaller, lower faces with lips and noses that are oriented further downward towards their chins compared to conservatives who have large lower faces with big jaws because they've got more testosterone and they're stronger. This is true, like even the women. And if you go to the gym, you stop being a little weedy, gimpy little left-wing person and you become a total right-wing Chad.
That's true.
That genuinely happens. People are strong.
The Guardian carried that story a couple of years ago. They were saying that careful, going to the gym can make you right-wing.
You'll get self-sufficiency and stuff like that. You'll stop trying to be a leech in
society. It is interesting. The testosterone thing, I think, is exposure, like womb exposure to androgens, as they call it, generally speaking, does change the shape of your face. There's a chap called Edward Dutton who wrote a whole book about it. It's very interesting. And there are, there's all kinds of evidence that, I mean, not phrenology, not getting into skull shape.
It's a bit like that.
But there are there are definitely, about the 2,4-D thing. Yeah, that's interesting.
If you can hit your prostate.
About Dave Allen. I don't know what he was, but he was something, wasn't he? Firstly, this could win the election for Rishi.
Yeah.
Because think about this the other way around. Correlation, not causation. This is people going, oh, I want to look like I've got a really big square jaw, and I want to look like I'm a thin-faced, attractive person. Oh no, I'll vote right-wing and see if suddenly.
Unfortunately, Rishi himself just doesn't kind of come into focus in that assessment. Does he? I don't see him like
that.
The
Conservatives aren't a right-wing party.
No,
you can tell by their faces.
Gavin Williamson was probably about the best chin they had on there.
Oh dear, really?
But I remember
this could just save us the bother of an election, though, because both human assessment and AI had the same results. It's just scan people's faces, get it over and done with, find out what the country thinks.
Absolutely, Gerard Depardieu. There was a chin, and look what happened to him. Steve, Daily Mail have what they describe as the terrifying prospect of an 89-year-old man being moved out of high-security prison into a normal one.
For context, think about who it is, though. Incest monster Joseph Fritzl's lawyer insists that her client is going to be released from high-security prison after repeatedly showing remorse for his crimes as court considers moving him to normal jail. Important, the headlines kind of make it look like he's going to be released to a normal jail. As you say, his age comes into it. But is prison really a punishment for a man who enjoyed being in a bunker? I don't know. The Regional Court of Krems has got together to decide on whether they should undo this block of him being... He should be moved to normal prison. There was a block on it. It's going to be lifted. What do you actually have to do in life to be locked up for life? I mean, I get it. The lawyer says he poses no threat to society. I mean, I suppose so. He's 89. He'd struggle with the steps. But still, you've got to be punished for what you did.
Yeah, but this high security isn't about being punished harder. It's about whether he presents a threat to society.
Yeah,
and at 89, he clearly doesn't.
She's talking about this being a step on the pathway to being released. So actually, I agree, move to normal prison because, yeah, you're right, he's not going to get out, is he? You know, they put a cattle grid there, he wouldn't get through it.
Well, obviously, at this point, he's in more danger himself than he presents to society. The risk is that he would be killed. Yeah. I mean, as it was in the high-security prison. Yeah,
he's changed his name and they put it in the article, so that helps.
I just think it's ridiculous when the Mail editorialise and say, you know, the terrifying prospect of Fritzl being released. You might find it sickening. You might find it immoral. It's not terrifying.
Yeah, but they probably wrote it in a hurry. Didn't have time for a thesaurus.
This really is terrifying, however, Leo. It takes a new take on Monsters, Inc. in The Guardian.
Yeah, so a toddler in North Carolina told her mother, they say mom here, but I'm not saying that, I'm Scottish, that monsters were in her closet. But in fact, there were more than 50,000 bees in the wall. After a visit by a pest control company and multiple beekeepers, a thermal camera finally revealed where the bees had gone to this massive hive they'd built inside the wall of her daughter's room. So the bees weren't coming into her daughter's room like in Monsters, Inc., but she could still hear these bees through the wall, which must just,
Wasn't that the plot of the Wasp Factory? I can't remember.
Oh, that was horrific. It was they'd laid the larvae were inside. There was a baby that had a deformed skull, so they had a fake metal skull over it.
Right.
And the larvae were inside the brain.
Something very unseemly about that.
Yeah. No, that was a horrible...
All right, I hear about these wasps.
That's where we're going to tie it up with that last minute, where we've run out of time. We don't get to do vampire facials. I'm sorry to say, but maybe on the way home. Anyway, the show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail, prostate scans that could cut deaths by 40%. The Guardian, 22 minutes of horror. Boy killed in sword rampage. Same with the Telegraph. Schoolboy killed in daylight sword rampage. The Times, immigration levels fall amid visas crackdown. The iNews, boy 14 killed on his way to school in horror sword attack. And finally, the Daily Star, make Britain great again. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Steve and Leo. Steve will be back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thanks very much for your company. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. A different day tomorrow. In the east, we'll have much more cloud compared to today, whereas in the west, it should be a little brighter. Still some wet weather around, though, across parts of Wales and southwest England this evening, affecting the West Midlands too. That showery rain working into southwest Scotland. At the same time, a few showers coming into eastern England, particularly Norfolk, Suffolk and up towards Lincolnshire. Many other areas, though, will be dry. Quite a mild night. Temperatures in some towns and cities staying in double digits. On to Wednesday, and a very different day across the northeast of England and eastern Scotland. Much more cloud around. There will be some rain at times here as well, particularly across the far northeast through the late morning into the early afternoon. A much brighter day there for Wales and southwest England. We'll see some sunny spells for Northern Ireland and particularly western Scotland. 18 degrees likely here. And further south with a bit of brightness, we might get close to 20 Celsius. But in the south, late on, Look at this, some heavy rain working up from France, and we could well see some big downpours and some thunderstorms, particularly through the early hours of Thursday morning across southern England, maybe the Midlands and parts of South Wales. So some rumbles of thunder, some flashes of lightning. They'll be clearing away during Thursday morning, but still staying cloudy with some showers in the south on Thursday. Many places elsewhere seeing some good spells of sunshine, but cool and cloudy on some of these North Sea coasts. But in the sunshine, 20 degrees possible in western Scotland.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a line. What is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com.